Greetings, everyone. My name is Mario Blandini. I'm founder of Resolve Networks and host of the Comeback Podcast, where we explore hopeful thoughts and perspectives involving the good deeds of people. My mission's simple, to prove that good is more than charity. Because when we're all united by a common purpose and we're engaged by it, it's really everyday people that I believe will play the decisive difference in achieving a greater good, because we're stronger together. My hope is that the good deeds of volunteers will play a part in they themselves reaching their highest potential as well. And joining me for a chat this morning is Commander Mark Mhley, United States Navy retired. Good morning, sir. How you doing?
Morning, Mario. I'm great. It's great to be here, too.
All right. And it's okay I call you Mark, right?
Absolutely. Although my Navy friends call me Fun, so you can do that, too.
All right. Your call sign, Fun.
That's right.
Tell us what you used to fly.
So I am a Naval Academy graduate who went on to fly the F-14 Tomcat, the mighty F-14, and then was a Top Gun instructor in the early 2000s, moved on to fly the F-18 Super Hornet, and then had the great opportunity and great honor to work with the Joint Special Operations Command as a operational planner and executor for 4 years, working with a really high-performing team of SEALs. And then after 4 years of that, needed a break and had an opportunity to teach the Naval Academy.
All right.
Just retired about 3 years ago, so you don't need to call me sir. You call me
All right. Well, it's the enlisted Marine in me that just can't help it. But yeah, Mark, we've run into each other in our second lives, so to speak. I was just a one enlistment Marine, but we share a common bond we're going to talk a lot more about today. But my first question to every guest is, are you hopeful?
Absolutely. Anytime I can come here and talk to you, especially with your goal and your purpose of highlighting supporting each other as veterans, makes me hopeful that veteran entrepreneurs, the veteran community really can plant the seeds for a rebirth in America, not just for our economy, but of our values and our political system and everything that we find challenging today.
Yeah, well, for me, I believe that comeback stories are something that have an arc that never ends, right? I've got a big one for mine, but before I share mine, what is your comeback story? You've achieved, obviously, a super high potential. I wanted to grow up and be you, right? Who hasn't wanted to do your job? But what's so great is that you're not done yet. Tell us about your comeback story, kind of past, present, and future.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I want to grow up and be me too someday. You know, sometimes I feel like I've lived a very I know I have lived a very privileged life. And when people ask me, or they probably ask you, like, hey, thank you for your service, I struggle how to answer that. And the best answer I can give now is it was a privilege. Mm-hmm. And looking back on it now, I understand that. Whether you served for 5 years.
Yeah, I say it was my honor,
years.
Right?
Yeah.
After my dad told me I was a wuss, I'd never make it one day in the Navy, right? So I joined the Marine Corps instead.
Well, you did okay.
I did.
So, my comeback story is a lot like so many other veterans. And it connects my service to what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And it is all about failure in the field, learning that success comes through mutual support, to grow through that failure, and then to move forward to crush it. Yeah. And let me tell the story.
Please.
And I love that your globe it's staring at me in the face because my comeback story occurs.
Oh, literally right there.
So it's that little spot there called the Gulf of Aden.
Yeah.
Which Marines know well from all the Marine Expeditionary Units that are out there. Marines who have been on Muse.
Hoorah.
Who have floated in the Gulf of Aden or the North Arabian Sea. The quick story that is my comeback, that comeback into what I'm doing today. Was born out of failure. 9 years ago, May 2nd, 2011, something very important happened for our nation. That was the mission to capture, kill Osama bin Laden. As everybody knows, it resulted in his death and his burial at sea. Wildly successful operation. Well, at the same time that was occurring, I was aboard the USS Boxer in the Gulf of Aden. We had just captured an Al-Qaeda operative by the name of Akhmutullah Borsami, who was this young Nigerian kid who was operating between Yemen and Somalia. He was an Al-Qaeda liaison, planning operations between the two countries. We captured him on a dhow. We brought him back to the USS Boxer. Everyone on the ship thought he was a pirate, but he was actually an Al-Qaeda detainee. Well, he provided so much information so fast, we began to be able to plan operations to counter Al-Qaeda in Yemen. I was sent out there as a liaison, as an operational planner to integrate the Marine Aviator Harriers into the fight, to get them to target the information this kid was providing us. To summarize the failures that occurred, we basically jumped into this situation. We hadn't really planned together. We hadn't really sniffed each other out very long. We thought that we could just give the Marines targetable information. They would launch their Aviates, go kill somebody, come back to the ship. That's what Marines do, right? I thought that was how Marines did it too. That's not true. Marines have a very methodical planning process. They have a very scripted execution process that allows them to do anything in 4 hours or anything in 120 minutes per their rules and their restrictions and their risk management profiles and all these things that I did not understand. So what happened that one night when the number one target to the American people named Anwar al-Awlaki popped up in a car driving in the desert in Yemen, I got instructions from my boss, who was in Virginia Beach, who said, launch the Aviates now. Go get them. And it was like, okay, so I'm like, who do I go tell this to? And I initiated the sequence for the Marines on the USS Boxer. And what was supposed to be a 60-minute process, we tried to cut down. Like, go now, this is the number one threat to the homeland, make this happen. And a number of things happened that I didn't expect. We had an engine failure in the flight deck. The Marines wouldn't launch one aircraft. They wanted to wait for both aircraft to come up to fly over into Yemen as a pair. Safety in numbers, right? So all this string of events occurred all within 2 hours, and we couldn't get the capabilities the Marines were there to provide into the fight to go target this high value target that was presidentially aughthorized to be taken out in the battlefield. And meanwhile, I tried to convince this Marine 06, the MEU commander, who is a great leader named Stretch Kaufman. And if Stretch was listening to this, sir, I have so much respect for you. But that night, he wanted to punch me in the face because I presented him so much risk to his force in the blink of an eye. And we were pressing his Marines in ways that he had not been stressed in combat. And the stress of the highest profile threat, engine failure in the flight deck, we're pulling the Marines out of their comfort zone. We had never rehearsed this together. We didn't understand each other's approach to risk managing and executing in contingency. And Stretch decided he would not launch one Aviate Harrier. He wanted to wait, and he did. Harriers get airborne, they get overhead the target area, and they can't find the vehicle. They're talking to the intelligence surveillance aircraft overhead, and they're not using the same words because they'd never trained together. And so they didn't understand each other. The Marines were held off because Aviates are loud, and that the Air Force guys were afraid that the Aviates would scare the target. We had all sorts of misunderstandings. To make the long story short, the Marines never attacked the target that night. We used some Air Force unmanned Predators back then who missed the vehicle with their Hellfires. Anwar al-Awlaki gets away, and he would escape being captured or targeted for the next year. Now, that night, I didn't sleep. The next night, I didn't sleep. We failed as a team. And it took us the next week or two to digest why we had failed. And we had failed because we hadn't taken the time to partner with each other, to understand each other, to plan each other, and to build a team with each other.
Right.
And so we began training. We brought everybody together, and we put them all in the same area. And here's what we did. We just conducted an exercise, face-to-face, and we practiced this, and then we built a team that was able to execute this multiple times after. Okay, so out of that failure, we came back as a team by learning how to partner together, by building trust with each other. Now, 9 years later, here I am out of the Navy as in entrepreneurship, and my comeback story personally is based on the same experience. It's realizing that all of us who are building businesses are not solo entrepreneurs.
That's for sure.
There is power in the teamwork. And I have found great power as I pivoted out of failing in my first year of entrepreneurship to bringing together a team of veteran entrepreneurs who all want to support each other and who want to build trust with each other. And with us, it's much faster because of our affinity.
Amen.
And we can roll right into supporting each other's businesses, bringing everybody else under our fold to address their challenges too. So what I've learned is the power of partnerships based on trust.
And trust is 100%. And to me, it's the hardest thing for we humans to give one another, right?
Yeah.
Especially these days because it's hard. We're in a pandemic where we can't look each other eye to eye and build that trust. And I think that oftentimes it's hard to rely on people when it comes to trust. But let's go a little bit deeper into affinity. It's my belief that as a Marine, I would have jumped on a grenade like many Marines have if that was the situation that presented itself, because that's what the mission calls for, and we tend to say God, country, core, and then comes family and other affinities, right? And now in our lives today, it's obviously probably your highest faith, maybe your family over country. No one's going to really dispute that.
But Navy's got the same thing.
Yeah.
Shipmate self.
Yeah.
Same stuff.
All right, but the cool thing is that at least with the trust that we already have built in, there is that affinity. So talk about what it means to you, because I could talk all day about what it means to me.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The affinity is built on trust. My comeback story is built on trust. My business model is built on trust.
Yeah.
You know, I host the All Call series, and the power in that is not the affinity we have for each other. As a former Marine building Resolve Networks and a former Naval Aviator building Reformed, it's that we have a shared system of values that's based on our past sacrifice and commitment.
Yep.
And so any business requires an exchange of risk that you give each other. It starts with a handshake, right? And that builds trust. But we as veterans already have that shared commitment and sacrifice. So you already come in not with this amount of trust, but this amount of trust.
I'll go with one more than that to say that it's the shared experience, because one might argue whether it's a faith-based group, another type of fraternal organization, anything that provides a shared experience, naturally people have the ability to trust a little bit more. And I think one of the cool things about the organization that you run and why we ran into each other and why I participated is that the giving of someone really is about giving. It's not about expecting something in return, because there's so much value we have to help one another. And not only do you have to have somebody willing to give, but you have to be willing to trust to receive said information, right? And we're all very skeptical because we think people are trying to sell us stuff, right? And I get it. That's what makes the world go around. But
Ari, that's what trust is. It's an exchange.
Yeah.
It's you give, I give. You get, I get. And it's those small exchanges that build into larger exchanges that make the business world work. And I think, that's what my business is doing. We're building a family of trusted and vetted business services delivered by veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs. Because we're veteran entrepreneurs, we already have that amount of trust. So getting to the deal is so much easier. So I think,
and you can cut through a lot of the back and forth, as I like to say, the protocol negotiation, if you're a nerd out there, or just the formalities of going back and forth, being able to get straight to it. And I think it goes back to that point you made earlier, Mark, which is that we have a common framework on how we see things going, and if there isn't a structure that we can all follow, then obviously it takes time to do that thing. But I think the reason why your vision is going to be something that turns into something big is that I believe it's a lot easier to gain that trust and fall into what would be a pretty sensible way to work with each other. Because here in the civilian world, I don't think we like to go through as much planning, so to speak. We have a short attention span, but the shared values play a lot in that. Talk about the story arc of where you see yourself going, because my comeback story really is one that is yet to be written.
Yeah.
And what for you, maybe talk a little bit more about where you see your story arc, because you're going somewhere and you'll probably arrive like a hurricane somewhere in that kind of range. So where do you see your story arc going?
Well, Mario, I'll tell you, I'll change the words on you. Where are we going?
Amen, brother.
And I think what you have built with the Comeback Pod, with Resolve Networks, with the idea of doing good is more than charity, and how do we and let's just talk about the veterans, because you're focused on broader community, but if you talk about veterans,
my favorite affinity group, by the way. Right. Love the environment too, and we'll talk other podcasts will cover that, but I really do love this audience.
Yeah, where's the arc of where we're going? It's where are we going together? And what you're doing is you're finding a way to better focus the goodwill, the trust, everything that was born on all that shared stuff that you just talked about, the trust we have in truly accomplishing profound change for the veteran community.
But see, to me,
Whether that's in business-
I don't see it as change, brother. I see it as just doing something different and achieving a different outcome.
Yeah.
Because one might argue there's no shortage of organizations where you can get information to help you as a vet, whether it's from entrepreneurship, whether you're someone in need, whether you're looking to engage. It's just, my thought was, darn it, it's just not very fun. It's not easy. It's not accessible.
Yeah.
And sometimes they want money out of you, which is even the worst part, right? Because really, it's not the money I can give somebody that's going to make them successful. And I think you'd agree, the people in our community, it's us giving our time, energy, passion, and effort, which we do have an abundance of. I mean, just cut out some of your social media time and dedicate it to doing something good, and you can feel really good about yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm passionate about our audience because we have that kind of built in. There's something, a good feeling about seeing a brother or sister actually make their own comeback, right?
Yeah. And so that's truly where we are going together, is building a community that becomes not just self-supportive and empowering each other to grow, that it's all about exchanging trust, which builds relationships, which builds business deals, which helps your business grow and my business grow.
Yeah.
So I think where is Reformed going? We're building a nationwide ecosystem that is grounded in the Affinity group and those values we talked about, and in trust. And we're going to empower veterans and military spouses, because they're critical.
Amen, brother.
Too,
I mean, it's a huge part of it.
to both thrive and to see the power in partnerships, to see the power in the concept of where you go, we all go. Where one goes, we all go.
Yeah.
And so we're building that community where we are demonstrating that there is much to be gained from giving help as getting help. And that's truly what we learned when we were in our
It's a feeling too.
boot camp or officer training or
Exactly.
even flight training. It's the same thing. It's all of that stuff. Remember from boot camp about doing flutter kicks because one person made a mistake that you remember that stuff, and that stuff still applies.
Hey, well, as an enlisted person, sir, I had to pick up a lot more trash than you did around the barracks. Probably.
Marty, you do have to explain to me what a police call
Okay,
is.
for those who don't know, it's picking up trash, which in OCS you probably had to cut the grass with scissors and do other sorts of
Just call
crazy
it
stuff.
go pick up the trash.
All right, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Cool, but we also use funny words like ahead for where you relieve yourself, right?
Yeah.
From a Navy perspective.
But I want to hit on one more thing real fast, because that question is so important. You asked is like where are we going with all this, with your effort to bring a greater good from this trust and this affinity, where I'm trying to bring the community of veteran entrepreneurs, military spouse entrepreneurs,
And small businesses too.
small businesses. We aren't just trying to build this contained system that is exclusive of the rest of the American society and community. Instead, I don't look at it that way. I think the best answer I can give you about where is this all going, I've seen it's become clear during the pandemic.
Which is my next question, by the way. So carry on,
segue.
brother.
I think that what you are doing and what we're doing is planting the seeds for a new American economy. And I think it is grounded in trust.
I didn't pay you to say that, by the way.
No.
I couldn't agree more.
I'll take the check. But I think maybe you've heard this. What motivated me tremendously to grow the business was it was a simple statistic that I caught from the Pew Research Foundation, and that is, I'll ask you the question. The first one's obvious. What's the most trusted institution in the United States of America?
I think it would vary by where you are, but
It's the military.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody knows. We all generally agree with that. Do you know what the second most trusted institution is?
don't.
It's American small businesses. So
it makes sense.
So then what does 1 + 2 mean to us as veteran entrepreneurs? It gives us great responsibility. We together form the most trusted group in America. So once we realize that, the rest of the American people are looking up to us to lead the way. When the pandemic set in, it wasn't time to retreat. And it wasn't time to roll up and roll into a ball and say, I'm just going to wait this out. It was time to
Take action.
But just as we, as former Marine, former Naval Aviator, we're trained to do, adapt and overcome, and bob and weave, and figure it out. And not just figure it out, but go win.
That's right.
So, when do Marines back off from a challenge like that?
Never.
But we all saw civilian businesses. I hate to say civilian businesses. There were a number of businesses that faced challenges they couldn't overcome, and whether they temporarily closed or they shuttered their doors. All different reasons, and I respect all of their decisions to do that. But I wanted to do everything I could with the affinity group that we're a part of to prevent that from happening, and then to help these businesses explode and propel them through the pandemic.
All right, I'll recap what you just said because it's just really a part of why this podcast series exists, which is we are stronger together.
We are.
And yes, the non-veteran crowd or non-military spouse crowd may not have that same affinity, but I'd argue the same activity that Affinity enables helps everybody. And at the end of the day, we are American citizens and part of our communities just the same. So there is an opportunity. You talked about it being somewhat of a new, rather than a new economy, which sounds super big, how about a new idea to the economy that will evolve? Because just like the climate, change is inevitable, right? And rather than argue about things, how do we embrace change?
Yeah.
The pandemic obviously has brought a lot of that on. And I'm hoping that in people experiencing that, it opens themselves up to think differently. And I think different can be good, as Einstein taught us. Doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity.
That's
and to me, it's something that we as veterans often are labeled. We're not able to assimilate back into the civilian community, so to speak. A lot easier for me. I did 6 years. You were just out 3 years, and I did a long career. But this idea of assimilating back in. So how do you feel about the reality that veteran entrepreneurs and mil spouses are indeed just everyday old Americans too, right?
How do I feel about that?
Yeah.
I'm encouraged by it because, as I got in, like you said, I just got out of the Navy, got into the business world, and there were some things that blew me away. There are a lot of unethical characters out there. Snakes in the grass, the snake oil salesman. And they're predatory. And on our community too.
Of course.
So what gives me hope, but also has become my mission, is to, and this gets to what's the arc? Where is this going? Where is our mission colliding?
Yeah.
It is to build the affinity group to a point that group that rests across America doesn't look inward to itself to provide that mutual support to fend off the predators and the snakes, just to do business with each other. Yeah. Right now during the pandemic, we are all strengthening each other's efforts, stronger together.
Amen.
It's supporting each other so that when this new American economy or, evolved American economy, I like how you said that, evolves out of the pandemic, and we all expect this once there's a vaccine, that we're ballooning, we're exploding our businesses. It's so that we can all turn outward with that affinity group at our back, and we can help our civilian brothers and sisters who have not had the benefit of that affinity group, who haven't had the benefit of the genuine support and the trust that we have, and we can help push them as well. What good is building an ecosystem of just veteran and military spouse businesses if it doesn't serve the greater good of the American people? Right?
To me, that's not unlike the Yellow Pages or a directory, which they have utility, don't get me wrong, but to get that next level of value that comes from people sharing of themselves, not for financial gain, but potentially just to do it in support of somebody they care about, and as I always talk about, receive some of the hormone responses that whether you're a Darwinist or a person that believes in a higher creator, we've got these systems in our body that give us serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine, the same thing as social media, just better when mixed with other things, and endorphins, because I'll admit, I get pumped up when I can see somebody that I've helped take a step forward, because the reality was, had I not told them that, they may not have taken that step. They still may have, but it's a tempo thing, right? And I think that's another thing I want to talk to you about. The pandemic has taught us to kind of, go slower. Shouldn't we think about increasing the tempo? That's kind of what I've always thought. Hey, when stuff starts getting, a little bit challenging, increase the tempo, because whatever you're fighting against, it too, is trying to go faster.
Let me go back to the first point you made, because I think you hit on something very important. You hit on social entrepreneurship, and it was what is it? Not oxytocin. It was the high, whatever that drug is in your brain.
Helper's high. It comes from serotonin, oxytocin.
Serotonin. Yeah. So the helper's high is a real thing. If you feel it and I feel it, I bet you so many other veteran entrepreneurs, military spouse entrepreneurs feel it too.
Yeah, people they accuse me of being so high energy. I love to share my
I will accuse you of
happy.
that as well.
I like to share my happiness chemicals. Yes.
And it takes leaders like you with that energy to actually compel the rest of us to action. So don't ever apologize for that.
I don't.
I get told that too. Like, no, don't ever apologize for how much energy you have. So, and I love you for putting all of yourself into this. Right now, you have put all of yourself into social entrepreneur and social entrepreneurship.
A purpose-based business, purpose over profit.
But I will argue that veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs are all social entrepreneurs.
Of course,
because of our affinity, because of that trust, because we all understand that high that comes from the support. And we feel it every time we have one of these all calls, do we not?
We do. And it's a bigger why. I mean, just taking it away, because some people don't like all this military jargon. I'll admit, 24 years in Silicon Valley, living in California, people could see me as very non-military, non-veteran. And to me, it crosses over everywhere.
Yeah.
In the sense that we want to do something good. I just fundamentally believe that people like doing good things for other people. And 150 years ago, you couldn't survive in this world if you didn't, on a daily basis, help somebody. You can't go more than 5 minutes without doing something that's part of a team in the military, during your service. It seems like that we don't take enough opportunities to make the larger why a motivator for us and tie that back to purpose. Because it doesn't always have to be social impact. The purpose can be anything, but you have to answer that why question.
Well, let's get to your second point about action. And you're like, how do we get faster, and how do we get to a more robust, path forward in the pandemic, right? Isn't that what you asked?
Yes. How do we increase the operational tempo?
And it all comes down to my comeback story.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to stronger together. And it all comes back to the idea that 1 + 1 is actually equal to 3. But you know what? Sometimes 1 + 1 can be equal to 5.
Amen.
And here's what, for those that are not really tracking what I'm saying, I flew a 2-seat aircraft most of my adult life. And in our training as a Top Gun instructor especially, while that it wasn't couched in these terms, I now see it this way. Our goal as Top Gun instructors was to prepare crews and divisions, think multiple aircraft together, to operate in a way that made it seem that a 2-person cockpit, 2-person crew was doing the work of 5 people, so that 4 aircraft were doing the work of 10.
That's
and
right.
when you see how to be operationally efficient and operationally dominant like that, you can find a cure for cancer in a cockpit. It's amazing what you can do. And
Stronger together.
Stronger together. And it translates to the comeback story of like, hey, look, we failed because 1 + 1 in that situation equaled 0.7. That's never good. That leads to failure. How do we make 1 + 1 equal 3 or 4 or 5? And it took us creating a whole partnering exercise and a series of events where we dedicated ourselves to building trust with each other and building a and building a relationship, right?
That's right.
So today, how do we get faster? How do we get faster and more effective as veteran and military spouse businesses? We take that approach of 1 + 1 equals 3, 4, or 5. We work together. We're tackling different areas of business. But when we can work together to not just support each other, but perhaps bundle our services, package our deals, market each other, that's where 1 + 1 equals 3, 4, or 5. This is very practical stuff. And I'm proud that we are both doing that with the Comeback League, with the Comeback Pod, with Reform's All Call series, and our business services as well. They all take they all have the same approach, and that is stronger together. That 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 is equal to 15, and that's why our community is going to hopefully show other sectors of the American economy that relationships, trust, affinity, can really make a huge business impact.
Well, I hope to prove this experiment out in real time because Resolve Networks has 2 game titles. One of them focuses on driving money to the environment, where the other one focuses on driving money to veteran suicide. And I know you'd agree that amongst veterans, if you had to pick one, preventing veteran suicide might be an important thing, especially here during the pandemic. But one thing that I wanted to ask you about was this idea that 1 + 1 equals something greater than 2.
Yes.
It doesn't have to always be that way, because sometimes you're sleeping, sometimes you're doing other things, but there are moments in time for very specific objectives where bringing multiple people together is necessary. So I think a lot of people say oh gosh, it's so much of a commitment. I'm so busy. How do I participate in one of these things? And how do we bring people to take part in it? And I'd argue that you can duck in and duck out. There's no requirement. There's no, at least, expectation, but you can put into it what you want to get out of it. And I think being able to respond when someone asks for help, because that's how you start every one of your calls. Tell us what your business is and what help you need. Not don't sell us your company. Like literally, what help that if you got it today would help you go faster. And the fact is you can get more than one person to come in and give multiple perspectives on that, I think is really cool. So talk about how you see an opportunity to bring people together in the idea that time is scarce, but it doesn't take much time to make a big impact.
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me answer it from the frame of the pandemic and going into it. So the All Call series was born in Annapolis during the start of the pandemic as an experiment. Actually, it wasn't even an experiment. It was just like, hey, we wanted to have a networking happy hour at Main Street Annapolis for a bunch of local veteran spouse entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Two atoms collided, energy
And
came out.
But then, if you all remember, you remember, what was that? It was like the first week of April. And all of a sudden we had this, here comes the pandemic. We all went into this shelter-in-place mindset, and it was going to be this 2-week deal. Remember that?
Flatten the curve.
It's kind of fun. Everyone's staying at home and flatten the curve. Right. Well, we shifted that event to being Zoom-based, and we did nothing more than there were 3 or 4 of us that shared it on our social networks and said, hey, we're going to do the Zoom call for veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs. Come join this call and just pitch your business. That was it. No explanation. And we had 125 people join that first call. Yep. It blew me away. It was an experiment. We didn't realize we were running an experiment, but as soon as we hung up that first Zoom call, the organizers realized, and I got to thank Jeff Mund, Ryan Sears, Jen Pilcher of Patriot Boot Camp. You guys were really instrumental in helping to make that happen. Now, what we learned, we didn't expect to learn, and that was going into this pandemic, there was a overwhelming demand from our affinity group, if you will, to stay connected with each other.
Yeah.
But also, not just to stay connected, get connected. And we just offered a means to do it. So what that taught me and the ensuing success of the All Call series is that our affinity group wants to have both the opportunity to give help and get help. And you summarized it really well. We want you to share your challenges. We want you to pitch your business. Don't be shameless, but give some help, get some help. And there is a overwhelming demand in our community to actually do that. Yeah. Have I figured out exactly why that is? I think it's what you said. It's that the dopamine, that hit in the brain that comes when you successfully help someone with a problem they're having. Yeah. And even better, when that person comes back to you and says, thank you for your help. What can I do to help you? It's that simple exchange builds trust, underpins the entire community, and it leads to why at the end of every All Call, do you know what I say?
I do. I'll let you say it.
Well, I'm gonna flub it because I believe it's something like be selfless, be resilient, be agile, be excellent.
That's right.
And I think that summarizes the expectations of our community to each other.
Right.
But I'm not demanding that from people. I am reflecting what I see in that community that comes to do those events.
Yeah. Well, I'll admit I have done a fair number of engagements connecting with what I call the veteran nonprofit industrial complex. And I don't say that in a negative way. It's just there is a huge abundance of services out there, almost too many.
Yeah.
Because
what's the number that you're tracking these days?
It's on the area of 46,000 different organizations. And sure, there's lots of ways you can cut that up.
Yeah, I heard it cut down, like if you remove the American Legions and the
But they count? Do they not count? I mean, as a member of both the Marine Corps League and the American Legion, they do count. And it's just my thing that we tend to, as veterans, almost compete more ferociously, in my experience, than groups of people connected by a common interest from my civilian experience, which is a lot more than yours. And I think a lot of it has to do with this idea that there is a finite amount of resource. Yeah. But what I love about the all-call is it's an infinite amount. Oh, sure, it is finite by some measure, but it's drawing from the passion and the energy and the time that we have to choose to give to somebody else. People think of it as a money game only. Like, hey, it's just all about the dollars. My whole business thesis is that the untapped potential from the energy we have to dedicate toward doing good deeds is going to be a really, really big number. So I created apps that measure that and hope to make that happen.
I think you just stated that very well in a very compelling way. The financial resources are finite,
of course.
But what I think I just heard you say is the generosity is in abundance. The trust and goodwill is in abundance.
The time we choose to do good deeds is in abundance. I mean, if people are spending 2,000 hours a year, the equivalent of a full-time job, consuming ads on their phone to make hundreds of billions of dollars for other companies, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's perfectly fine. It just demonstrates that there is time. Yeah. And if your eyeballs are worth that, imagine what your eyeballs, your mouth, and your heart can do when giving some of that back to the community. I think that's one of the rewarding things. Maybe we can start to wrap it up by talking about what rewards that you really feel in doing this.
Wow. You know what? I think the best answer I can give you is based on advice I got going into entrepreneurship. And that was, Mark, make the impact, the revenue will follow. Yeah. And I didn't understand what that meant for the first year of entrepreneurship where I was kind of failing forward. And it wasn't until I had failure under my belt that I realized I had a lot to learn and pay forward to the veteran military spouse entrepreneur community. And I made the decision to, with very little confidence in the revenue model, decided to pay forward what I had learned. Yeah. And so to answer your question, now that I'm building a sustainable business out of supporting veteran and military spouse businesses and helping them thrive, I think the word goes back to impactful. And everything that you shared earlier about what that social entrepreneur impact, how that makes you feel in the brain and in the heart, that's real stuff too. But come on, what it comes down to is I wake up every morning and I am fired up to look at my calendar and see 3 new entrepreneurs that I've never talked to who are former Marine infantrymen, a Navy.
I was on the aviation side, by the way.
Ordnance woman who's building a sugar replacement company.
Yeah.
Who I'm having lunch with today, Erica.
Yeah.
That stuff fires me up now to have the opportunity, actually, to have their trust, to have a 30-minute or 60-minute conversation with them halfway across the country, to have them be vulnerable and share what their challenges are. Trust me to connect them across the network. And then after those calls, I may have connected them to a business partner. They may have found one of our family of service providers was appropriate for them. And that's wonderful. But what really makes me fired up is to see I can connect that person to 5 other people who within an hour respond via email and say, let's
talk. Tempo. I'll admit, I'm really just honored to have you here, Mark. Not only as a brother in arms, but as somebody who has this idea that we together can be stronger together. Absolutely. And so last night we had a fun time doing your Dallas all call. I did lobby you to have a 1-4 Texas, and you're seeing that Texas is kind of fired up to have this community, which is totally awesome. Yeah. And so for me, I just want to thank you for making the trip down. You are the only live guest in my first several episodes, so I appreciate you doing that. It was fun to have you here in town, and so thanks a lot for not only the service you gave to our country, which I appreciate as much as any other American, but more importantly, that story's not over, that the service is going to continue, because together we have a lot of good deeds that we can turn into something very special, and together we're stronger. Yeah, we're stronger together.
Strong in our past, stronger together now, and stronger in the future might be a way that we can propel the energy to move forward. And it's been a privilege being here.
All right. Well, I couldn't have wrapped it up anymore, sir. Commander Mark Mhley, United States Navy retired, bringing you his perspectives and his hopeful thoughts and insights that involve doing good deeds. That's what we aim to do here on the Comeback Podcast. My name's Mario Blandini. I look forward to you checking out other episodes or checking out what we're doing as a company at Resolve Networks. You can go to operationcomeback.org to join in an operation where we aim to prove, that is, that good can and together will be more than charity itself. Thanks a lot for joining, folks. We'll see you next time.